The Lincoln Town car had seen better days. Paint fading at the hood, a dent above the rear wheel well that I kept meaning to fix, and a heater that worked only when it felt like it. I pulled into the parking lot of the Harrington Grand Hotel and sat for a moment, watching the valet attendants in their burgundy uniforms move between gleaming vehicles, a black Mercedes here, a silver Porsche there. I was wearing my old Carhartt jacket, the one with the frayed left cuff. My boots were clean, but they were work boots, the kind a man wears when he doesn't think about what he's wearing because he's spent 40 years thinking about more important things. I was 63 years old. I had a reservation. I stepped out of the car, and a young valet approached, then seemed to hesitate, eyes moving from my jacket to my boots and back up again. I handed him my keys without a word. He took them carefully, like he wasn't sure what to do next. The lobby of the Harrington Grand was the kind of place designed to make certain people feel welcome and certain people feel small. Marble floors the color of cream, a chandelier that probably cost more than my first house. A front desk made of dark wood that stretched the length of one wall, staffed by 3 young women in matching blazers. I walked toward the desk. Before I reached it, a man stepped into my path. He was tall, broad-shouldered, early 40s, with the kind of haircut that costs $80 and the kind of smile that never quite reaches the eyes. He wore a name badge that read, Derek Guest Services Manager. He was my son-in-law. "Dad," he said, and the word landed with all the warmth of a wet towel. "What are you doing here?" "I have a reservation," I said. 2 nights. Something moved behind his eyes. A calculation. He glanced back at the front desk, then at me, then at the lobby around us, as if checking who was watching. "You should have told me you were coming," he said, lowering his voice. "This is a 5-star property. We have a certain standard for guests." He paused, letting that sit. "Why don't you let me put you up at the Comfort Inn on Route 9? It's clean. It's affordable. You'd be much more comfortable there." I looked at him for a moment. "I have a reservation here, Derek." "Dad," he said it again with that same flat tone. "I'm trying to help you. This isn't really your kind of place." "My kind of place," I repeated. "You know what I mean." I did know what he meant. That was the thing. I understood exactly what he meant and exactly why he was saying it, and I stood there in that marble lobby in my Carhartt jacket, and I made a decision. Not an angry decision. A quiet one. "All right," I said. "I'll come back another time." He visibly relaxed. "That's probably for the best. I'll text you some good spots nearby." I walked back out through the glass doors. The valet brought my Lincoln around. I tipped him, got in, and drove out of the parking lot. I didn't look back at my son-in-law standing in the lobby doorway, watching me go with that satisfied expression I knew he thought I couldn't see. I drove to a diner 2 miles up the road, ordered coffee and eggs, and sat in a corner booth for an hour, thinking. My name is Robert Calloway. I taught high school chemistry for 22 years in Davenport, Iowa. People who know only that part of my life assume they know the whole story. A retired teacher, modest pension, the kind of man who clips coupons and drives a 14-year-old Lincoln because he can't afford anything newer. What they don't know is that 20 years ago, at night, on weekends, during summers, I had been quietly building something else. It started with a water purification patent I filed in 2003. Then a small consulting arrangement. Then a company called ClearPath Systems that my former student Marcus and I incorporated out of a spare bedroom. By the time I retired from teaching in 2018, ClearPath had contracts with municipal water systems in 11 states. In 2021, we sold it to an infrastructure group for a number above what most people make in 5 lifetimes. I kept teaching until the end because I loved it. I kept driving the Lincoln because I was comfortable in it. I wore the Carhartt because it was warm. None of this made me less of what I was. It just meant that most people, meeting me for the first time, drew the wrong conclusions. Derek had drawn those conclusions 4 years ago when he started dating my daughter Claire. I had watched him do it. I had watched him look at my house, a modest ranch style in a good neighborhood, and look at my car and look at my clothes, and construct a complete picture of me that had almost nothing to do with reality. I hadn't corrected him. I was curious to see what a man revealed when he thought no one important was watching. What Derek revealed, over 4 years, was not pleasant. He revealed it in small ways at first. The way he spoke to Claire in front of me, a slight edge of condescension that he didn't bother to hide because I wasn't in his assessment, anyone worth hiding it from. The way he talked about money constantly, his salary, his bonuses, the hotel's reputation, his trajectory. The way he looked at my granddaughter Sophie, who was 6, and my grandson Caleb, who was 8, as if they were accessories rather than people. Sophie had asked me once, on a Sunday afternoon when Claire had brought the kids to visit, why her daddy never came to her school plays. She said it matter-of-factly, the way children state things that break adult hearts. I told her some daddies had very busy jobs. She nodded like she was already learning not to expect too much. That was 8 months ago. I had been paying attention ever since. I finished my coffee at the diner and called Marcus. He did it in front of the lobby staff, Marcus said. In front of everyone. Robert. There was a pause. You know what I want to say. I know. Not yet. How much longer? I looked out the diner window at the gray November sky. I have a few more things to look at first. Marcus had known me for 30 years. He understood what that meant. I drove home to my house in Davenport and opened my laptop. I had been building a file on Derek Harrington for 6 months. Not for revenge, I want to be clear about that, even now. What I was building was a picture. When something about a situation doesn't add up, I want to understand why. That instinct had served me well in chemistry. It served me well in business. It was serving me now. What I had found was not a good picture. Derek's salary at the Harrington Grand was $94,000 a year, solid for a guest services manager in a mid-sized city. But his lifestyle didn't match that number. New car every 18 months. A lake house rental every summer for 2 weeks. Watches I recognized from catalogs Claire sometimes left at my house. Dinners at restaurants I knew were $200 a person. None of it was impossible. People stretched. People made choices. But when I looked at Claire, really looked, I saw a woman who was shopping at discount stores for her kids' clothes while her husband's watch cost as much as a semester of college. I saw a woman who looked tired in a way that went beyond being tired. I saw a woman who flinched very slightly whenever Derek's voice changed register. I had called a man I knew at a financial consulting firm, casually. Old friends catching up. I mentioned Derek's name, mentioned the hotel. My friend mentioned that the Harrington Grand had been having some internal audit issues. Nothing public. Nothing yet. Then last month, through a contact on the hotel's ownership board, a man named Gerald Fitch, who I had done business with 15 years ago, I learned something specific. The hotel had been tracking discrepancies in the event booking system. Deposits collected, but not fully recorded. A pattern that pointed toward someone in guest services management. I had that information in a folder on my laptop. I also had something else. 6 weeks ago, on a Thursday, I had driven to the school where Sophie and Caleb were enrolled. I parked down the street. At 3:15, the buses came. Claire's car was not there. Derek's car was not there. The person who appeared, right on time, was a woman I didn't recognize. A babysitter, I later learned. A teenager named Jessica, who Claire paid $14 an hour because Derek said they couldn't afford after-school care at the Y. I had called Claire that evening and said nothing about what I'd seen. I asked how things were. She said fine. I asked about the kids. She said great. Her voice had a careful quality that told me she was managing something she didn't want me to see. I hadn't pushed, but I had started writing things down. Now, 2 days after the lobby incident, I called Gerald Fitch. Gerald, I said, I need a favor. Nothing complicated. I need you to arrange something with the hotel's general manager. Gerald listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. You're sure about this, Robert? I'm sure. All right. Give me 2 days. While I waited, I drove to Claire's house on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced. She opened the door in her work scrubs. She was a pediatric nurse. Early shifts, and looked surprised, and then immediately worried. The way people look when a parent shows up without calling. Dad, is everything okay? Everything's fine. I was in the neighborhood. Can I come in? She stepped back to let me in. The house was clean but thin. That was the word that came to me. Thin. The couch had a cushion with a small tear that hadn't been repaired. The kids' backpacks hung on hooks by the door, and I noticed Caleb's had a broken zipper held together with a safety pin. On the kitchen table there was a stack of bills and an envelope from the kids' school about a field trip that cost $40. Claire saw me look at the envelope. A faint color came into her face. I'm going to send that in Friday, she said. I know you are, I said. She made coffee and we sat at the kitchen table and talked about the kids, about her work, about nothing in particular. Derek's name came up only once, when she mentioned he had a late night at the hotel. Her voice went careful again on that sentence, the way it always did. Before I left, I put an envelope on the table by the front door. She called out after me asking what it was. I said it was just something for the kids. Inside was enough to cover the field trip, new backpacks for both of them, and 6 months of after-school care at the Y. No note. She would know it was from me. She called that evening and cried quietly over the phone for 3 minutes, before pulling herself together and thanking me. I told her there was nothing to thank me for. She said, "Dad, you don't have to," and I said, "Claire, you're my daughter." That's the end of the discussion. What she didn't say and what I didn't say was anything about why she needed it. We weren't ready for that conversation yet, but it was coming. Gerald called me on Thursday. "It's arranged," he said. "General manager's name is Patricia Wu. She knows who you are, and she's expecting you Saturday morning at 10. She asked me to tell you the presidential suite is available for the weekend." I thanked him and sat with the phone in my hand for a while after we hung up. I thought about what I was doing. I thought about whether it was right. I had been taught by my own father, by 22 years of watching young people become who they were going to be, that there is a difference between justice and cruelty. Justice restores something. Cruelty just takes. What I was doing needed to be the former and not the latter. Derek had humiliated me in a hotel lobby. That part, frankly, I didn't care much about. I was 63 years old, and I had made peace with the fact that people would misjudge me, and that their misjudgment said more about them than about me. What I cared about was the pattern behind that moment. The discrepancies in the hotel's books that pointed to someone stealing from the place where my daughter's family's financial stability depended on his employment. The lake house and the watches purchased while my grandson used a safety pin to hold his backpack closed. The tired look in my daughter's eyes that came from being managed and diminished by someone who was supposed to be her partner. That was what I cared about. And the lobby had given me an opening. Saturday morning I dressed carefully, not to impress anyone. I want to be clear about that. I wore a dark wool blazer, pressed slacks, and the one pair of dress shoes I'd owned for 15 years because I had bought them well and taken care of them. I drove the Lincoln downtown and pulled up to the Harrington Grand at 5 minutes before 10. The same valet attendants were on duty. Different young man than before. He took my keys with a professional smile. I walked through the glass doors. Derek was at the front desk speaking to a staff member. He saw me the moment I walked in. The color changed in his face immediately, a complicated mixture of surprise and irritation, and, underneath both, something that might have been the first small shadow of uncertainty. He came toward me with that managed smile. "Dad, I didn't know you were." "Good morning, Derek," I said pleasantly. "I thought we talked about this." The smile was tightening. "This really isn't the right place for you to, Mr. Calloway." The voice came from behind the front desk. A woman in a charcoal blazer, mid-50s, authoritative posture, was walking toward me with her hand extended. This was Patricia Wu. I had looked her up 20 years in hotel management, a reputation for running an extremely tight ship, a general manager who believed, according to one profile I'd read, that the most expensive mistake a hotel employee could make was mistreating a guest. "It's wonderful to have you with us," she said. "Gerald speaks very highly of you. I hope your drive was easy." I shook her hand. "Very easy, thank you, Patricia." Derek had gone completely still. "Your suite is ready," Patricia said. "I've taken the liberty of arranging a few things for your stay, and I wanted to personally thank you for the conversation you had with the ownership board last month. The infrastructure consulting framework you outlined has been extremely valuable." She said this loudly enough that the two staff members at the front desk heard it clearly. The valet, who had just come in from the door, heard it. Derek heard every word. "My pleasure, entirely," I said. Patricia turned to Derek. Her voice didn't change temperature exactly, but something in it shifted the way a sky shifts before weather. "Derek, I'd like to speak with you in my office at 11. Please make sure your schedule is clear." Derek said, of course, in a voice I had never heard from him before. Quiet, uncertain. A staff member escorted me to the elevator. I didn't look back at Derek. I didn't need to. The presidential suite was on the 14th floor, and had a view of the river that on a November morning looked like hammered silver. There was a fruit arrangement on the table and a handwritten welcome note from Patricia. The bathroom had a soaking tub and heated floors, and towels so thick they felt like they had opinions. I sat in the armchair by the window and looked at the river for a while. I wasn't feeling triumphant. I want to be honest about that. What I was feeling was something quieter and more complicated. A kind of sorrow, actually. Not for myself, for my daughter. For the years she had spent in a house where the financial picture didn't add up and the man she'd married looked at her the way Derek looked at her. At 11:40, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered it. Mr. Calloway. It was Patricia. I want to update you on something. Our internal audit, which has been ongoing for 3 months, reached a conclusion this morning. I've just finished a conversation with Derek and with HR. I thought you should know, given your relationship to the situation, that Derek is no longer employed by the Harrington Grand. I was quiet for a moment. I see. I want to be clear, she said, that this decision was the result of our internal process. It had nothing to do with your presence here this morning. The audit was going to reach this point regardless. Your visit simply accelerated the timeline. I understand, I said. Thank you for telling me. After we hung up, I sat for a long time in the armchair. Then I called Claire. She didn't answer. I left a message asking her to call me when she had a moment, that I was in the city, and would she and the kids like to come for dinner. Normal, ordinary words. Nothing about Derek. That conversation would happen when she was ready for it, not when I decided she needed to have it. She called back at 2 in the afternoon. Her voice was strange, not the careful strange of before, but a raw, fractured quality that told me something had already happened. Dad, she said, Derek called me. He said he was let go from the hotel. I heard something about that, I said. A long pause. He said you were there. He said you had something to do with it. Claire, I thought about how to say the next part. I went to the hotel because I had a reservation I had made legally that had been confirmed, that I had every right to use. What happened between Derek and his employer is between Derek and his employer. But you know Gerald Fitch, on the board. I do. Another long pause. I let it sit. Dad, she said finally, how long have you known? About the money. This was the question I had been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. I've been paying attention for about 6 months, I said honestly. I didn't act on anything until I was sure. She made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I want you to know something, I said. I didn't do this to make a decision for you. What happens next with your marriage, with Derek, with any of it that's yours to decide? I would never take that from you. What I wasn't willing to do was let something that was hurting my grandchildren keep going without doing what I could. The audit, she said quietly. What exactly were they auditing? I think you should talk to Derek about that directly, and I think you should have your own lawyer in that conversation. Silence. Claire, I love you. I'm at the Harrington Grand in Suite 1401, and the kitchen here will deliver anything you want, and I would very much like to see you and Sophie and Caleb tonight, if you're willing to come. She cried then. Not quietly this time, real, full crying, the kind that's been stored up for a long time. I listened and said nothing, because sometimes the most important thing a father can do is simply remain on the line. They came at 6. Sophie ran at me the moment I opened the suite door, and I caught her and held her, and she smelled like kid shampoo and something that had been microwaved. Caleb was 8 and tried to play it cool, but hugged me from the side in that way that boys do when they don't want to admit they're hugging you. Claire looked like she had been crying for 4 hours, and was now in the clear, still, exhausted place that comes after. We ordered room service burgers and milkshakes for the kids, pasta for Claire, soup for me. Sophie was overwhelmed by the suite and ran from room to room narrating everything she found. Caleb discovered the TV remote and became very still and very happy. Claire and I sat at the table by the window with the river now dark and lit by city lights below us. I knew something was wrong, she said. I've known for probably 2 years, but you tell yourself things. You tell yourself the money is just tight right now. This is just a phase. He's under stress at work. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I kept not asking the questions I was afraid to know the answers to. That's human, I said. You asked them for me. Not entirely, I said. I looked at things that were visible to anyone paying attention. I think part of you was asking them too. I think that's what that tired look has been." She was quiet for a moment. Sophie's voice drifted in from the other room, still narrating her exploration. Caleb laughed at something on TV. "What do I do now?" she said. "Tonight you eat pasta and watch your kids be happy in a nice hotel room," I said. "Tomorrow you call a lawyer, I know, if you're willing. After that, you make your own decisions at your own pace." She looked out at the river. "I thought about calling you so many times, and I didn't, because I didn't want you to think less of him, or of me for staying. Claire," I waited until she looked at me. "Nothing that has happened or will happen has changed what I think of you. Not 1 degree. You are the best thing I ever built, and I built a few things." She laughed at that. A real laugh, sudden and genuine. It was the first real laugh I'd heard from her in a long time. We sat there until the kids fell asleep on the enormous sweet bed, tangled together the way children sleep when they feel safe. Claire covered them with the blanket and stood there looking at them for a long moment. "He didn't deserve them," she said softly. Not with anger, just with the quiet certainty of someone who has finally let herself see clearly. "No," I agreed, "but they have you, and they have me." She turned and looked at me with an expression I remembered from when she was very small, a completely open, unguarded look that children give, and most adults forget how to. "How did you always know?" she said. "About everything. How did you always just know?" I thought about my father, who had worked a factory floor for 30 years and still managed to know everything that mattered. I thought about 22 years of teenagers who thought they were hiding things they weren't hiding. I thought about the peculiar education that comes from decades of paying attention to things other people overlook. "I didn't always know," I said. "I just never stopped looking." She nodded slowly. Outside, the river moved through the dark city below us, carrying whatever it carried, going where it went. The kids slept. The suite was warm. On the table, the remnants of room service dinner sat between us, and my daughter was already reaching for her phone to write down the lawyer's name I was about to give her. I had not come to this hotel to win anything. I had come because a man who underestimated me had, in doing so, revealed exactly who he was. And once you see that clearly, you cannot unknow it. You can only decide what to do next. What you do next, I had learned across 63 years of living, says more about you than anything that was done to you. I had tried to do the next thing right. Whether any of it would hold up over time, whether Claire would find her footing, whether the kids would carry any of this into their adult lives as damage or as strength, none of that was mine to control. A father's job is not to control. A father's job is to show up, to pay attention, to tell the truth when it's needed and hold his tongue when it isn't, and to still be there in the room when everyone else has gone to sleep. I was still there. That was all I had ever tried to be.